what happened in the last election isn't new. We've seen it happen in Nigeria countless times. INEC may say whatever INEC wants to say, but we all know INEC is not reputable. They will still do what INEC always does. I mean, they almost did it in Abia State, but luckily enough, you had a lady that was willing to stand up to them or to the politicians of PDP, right? But so for me, if I'm in LP, if I'm P2, if I'm one of the advisors to P2, which you were, I would have thought to myself and said, I don't expect INEC to be any different. I expect them to do what INEC always does. So what mistakes would you say? Would you look back and be like, you know what, we made some mistakes here, and looking forward, how do we correct those mistakes?
All right, guys, I've come again with a wonderful speech from our father, Dele Farotimi. Like I say, that man, you can never get tired of listening to that man. You can listen to him over and over again, because he's a man that drops wisdom. Every time he speaks the truth and drops some words of wisdom. So I guys should take a listen to his response on that thing that was asked about P2B and everything. And I love how he analyzed this issue of P2B and how people are hating on P2B. Just take a listen for yourself, and you can just comment in the comment section. I'll be with you guys in my next video.
Number one, you've got to understand that you couldn't be talking about a movement in 2022, 2023 in the same sense as you are talking about one in 2024, 2025.
Yes.
Peter Obi's entire presidential quest was, for the public at least, a spur of the moment thing. Spur of the moment in the sense that whilst he might have had the ambition, the people bought into the ambition and they more or less recruited him. I need you to understand that part. It could have been perhaps anyone else, but it was Peter Obi. The people found someone who could feel their pain. He spoke the language they could understand. Nigeria's oppressed, Nigeria's disadvantaged, the victims of Nigeria across the length and breadth of Nigeria coalesced behind the obedient movement. Those who believe that Nigeria has done them dirty came together. Peter Obi served as governor of Anambra State, and he left a good record there, regardless of what the politicians would have to say today.
I disagree, but I will let you continue. Yeah.
The general thought amongst the people of Anambra State, regardless of the politics.
I was in Anambra State, so I kind of have first.
Let me just put it this way: we can have an argument from now till tomorrow.
I don't want to.
You won't have 100% who will say that it was good, but it is beyond argument that a healthy proportion of people of Anambra said he did a good job. The support didn't just come from the people of Anambra, and it wasn't about Allah Igbo.
Yes.
The support, he won in Plateau,
Lagos.
He won in Lagos, and it's not the nonsense that INEC announced in Lagos. The victory in Lagos was resounding. It wasn't something that was influenced by an ethnic demography. No. He won across the length and breadth of Lagos State, including the Aboriginal settlements. So you're not dealing with an ethnic candidate. You're dealing with a candidate who embodied the hopes of generations. The youth across the ethnic divide invested their hopes in him. So when you talk about maybe there was something we could have done different, the only thing that you may say we might have done differently, with the benefit of hindsight, is that we should perhaps not have trusted Mahmoud Yakubu at all.
Yes.
We should definitely not have believed that the provisions of the Electoral Act would be followed,
yes,
which would have meant that we would have prepared ourselves for the streets, even as we were preparing for the ballot boxes. But I would also argue that whilst hindsight gives you 2020 vision, you really cannot prepare for all eventualities.
Yes,
It is those who might be interested in the coming election cycle who can, with the knowledge of what had happened in 2023, prepared for the street in 2027. So 2023, there was no basis for us to have anticipated the level of decadence that happened to our electoral system. Remember that in 2019, as bad as it was, there was a semblance of an election. In 2015, a sitting government had just been removed. So we were hoping that 2023 would have been a consolidation of what took place in 2015 when the will of the people was reflected in the outcome. No matter how fraudulent the marketing of the candidate was in 2015, he unsat a precedent. So we had no reason to believe that Mahmoud Yakubu was going to spring the kind of crazy surprises that he sprung. But 2027, anybody claiming that they were not prepared or they didn't know, that's a different ballgame. 2023, you would have to pardon us for being stupid enough to believe Mahmoud. Well, we were stupid to have believed him.
Yeah.
No, I will hold up to that stupidity. Okay. How do you trust a man who has done nothing to earn your trust?
Yeah.
And he proved us stupid. So we must admit to it.
Yeah. Do you think a much better preparation, sir, would be joining forces with PDP or a political party that has the structure?
What structure? The structure of impunity?
No, let me correct, or let me just state this for a fact, right? I believe in structures. By structures, I mean, so for example, your life has structure, my life has structure.
We didn't lose 2023. No, we didn't lose 2023 because of a lack of structure.
But one would argue, I think I saw on the internet that LP didn't have polling agents and a lot of...
What about PDP? Didn't PDP have? I was in the situation room.
Yeah.
And what I can tell you is this. Where we didn't have polling agents, PDP had.
But PDP is not LP.
But we shared resources.
Why? It's a different political party.
Number one, remember this. I am not a member of Labour Party.
Okay.
I worked for Peter Obi.
Yes, that's true.
And in looking at the election, I was looking at the election holistically. Holistically in the sense that I wasn't looking at parties. Yes. I was looking at what resources were available. And the resources that were available in the situation room were those from the different parties. There were, I think, 19 parties or thereabout that went into that election. Where the Labour Party didn't have polling agents, other parties had. And we shared information. In Lagos State, for instance, it was the PDP that brought out the election result that was contrary to what INEC and Segun Agbaje, the REC in Lagos, brought out. They brought out the result in Lagos State without a single Form EC8A backing it up. Where did they get those results from? But PDP had the Form EC8A. We also had the Form EC8A, and we cross-referenced. And that was how the bulk of the results that we have today were compiled. INEC up until today cannot give you the result for 2023 election. They uploaded a whole load of nonsense in a whole load of places, and they cannot give you a coherent result. But to a very large extent, what they continue to ignore is that there were at least 18 political parties. If the Labour Party did not have polling agents in every polling unit, other parties had. One of those parties with which we synergized in compiling results in the situation room was the PDP.
So wouldn't it make more sense then, looking forward to 2027? My two-part question, sir. Would you think P2B has a chance in the next election? And wouldn't it make more sense to prepare in this belief, in this recognition of how important it is to prepare? Wouldn't it make a lot more sense to synergize with PDP or a bigger, which could be SDP, for example?
Let me say this. I believe since after the 2023 election, we've had 5 gubernatorial elections. What INEC has done is to establish its uselessness in the course of conducting those 5 elections. What it has done consistently is to prove that it is more useless than the last time. So I don't know the basis upon which anybody will be expecting a different outcome in 2027. I don't know if our judiciary would have suddenly found itself on the road to Damascus and become born again to the point where there will be anything meaningful changing in 2027. So, in the absence of electoral reforms, in the absence of judicial reforms, if you like, go and bring 100 PDP with their structures, as long as they are not, that structure does not include the control of Mahmoud Yakubu or whoever is replacing Mahmoud Yakubu, if they decide to replace Mahmoud Yakubu, as long as Ekekere Ekun and a cohort are still sat in judicial offices, as long as a wicked is still the one appointing resident electoral commissioners, such as the one that came and ran the election in Edo State, what do you expect?
Yeah, but we can't just give up though. It's as if you're saying we should just throw up our hands in the air. Oh. I mean, the coalition of parties that were formed in 2015, CPC, those three parties that came together to form APC,
AC.
Yeah, they didn't give up. They tried at least to coalesce.
Let me tell you something. I was opportune to meet President Jonathan in person sometime, I think it was this month. No, last month. It was I was part of those who had to receive him at Chivayo Adebanjo's residence after Papa died. And I looked at the man and I realized why the APC could do what it did in 2015. Jonathan is a man of peace. He's not your typical Nigerian politician. What qualified Jonathan to be the deputy governor in Bayelsa disqualified him to be the president of Nigeria. What qualified him to be the vice president to Yaradua disqualified him from being the Nigerian president. It is those disqualifications that made it possible for APC to gain power in 2015. The first job of the Nigerian president from inception has been to preserve themselves in power. Whether that means killing,
consolidate power,
whatever they had to do, they did. Jonathan was too much of a gentleman to play that game. That's why he's out of power. To now answer your question, I don't believe that Tinubu cannot be removed from office. But I don't believe that will be achieved because a coalition of disgruntled politicians came together to decree it. It will only happen when the people come to the knowledge of the fact that power resides with them. It is in that knowledge that they can work to remove the APC. The blight that has overtaken our land can never be removed on account of politicians cross-carpeting up and down the place. In any case, when have you ever heard Nigerian politicians quarreling over substantive issues of policy?
No.
Or anything of the sort?
Ideology, no.
Never. The only time they quarrel is when they can't share the loot in their preferred fashion. So that PDP or Pupupu or this one or that one, I'm not interested in coalitions of politicians. I would love to see Nigerians realigning across the length and breadth of Nigeria, awakening to the fact that this is their country, they have no other one, and they are the ones who would have to save it. Organizing themselves to resist the burgeoning impunity that has overtaken our country. That will give me hope. But talking about politicians aligning, forming this or forming that coalition, I just see it as more of the same old nonsense. I don't see that birthing any change of any sort.
Yeah, I mean, staying on the topic of Jonathan, since you brought him up, like for me personally, he was one of he's such a weak, ineffective, feckless leader.
See, like, that's the thing right there.
Yeah.
Weak, feckless. But it is systems and institutions that are required to be strong.
But people make up institutions. The people have to build them up. It takes time to build institutions.
People build institutions. I'm not denying the fact of Jonathan's weakness, but I'm explaining that persons need to be weak. It is systems that should be strengthened. That Jonathan is a weak person, is what would have disqualified him from the governorship of Bayelsa and what would have disqualified him from the presidency of Nigeria. But if he was weak and institutions were strong, what happened to him, what is happening to us, would not be happening.
Yeah, but one can argue, and I will argue, that his weakness destroyed Nigeria. His weakness brought in Boko Haram.
What do you think he could have done? No,
he was so weak that his military, his NSA,
I must disagree.
Stole billions of dollars.
No, I must disagree vehemently with that.
But everything stems from the leader, sir. The leader is the one that look at Dubai. One can argue that the UAE has no institutions at first. It took one leader to transform Dubai.
No.
So if we had a good president...
No. I must disagree with you. Vehemently true. And I will explain my rationale. In the first place, the ruler of Dubai had an overarching vision,
yes,
by which he wanted his country developed. And he set himself about the task. Remember, he did not have constitutional restraint on office. He didn't have to worry about elections. I'm not suggesting that should be a bar to visioning. Don't get me wrong. Now, remember as well that the APC is the most virulently propagandic organization that has ever existed in Nigeria. They claimed he stole this, he stole that, he did this, he did that. How many people have been sentenced to jail for these stealings?
Very few, 1 or 2.
The APC has been in power for 10 years. The only person convicted for corruption from the whole Jonathan government, I think it was Metu, and the late Okupe.
Yeah, doing Okupe.
What did they steal? They didn't get approval. They split it, and I think they didn't get approval. They collected money in cash. What about the billions that Dasuki was supposed to have stolen? What has happened to him? He's not facing trial in any court in Nigeria again now. So, when you've not proven any allegation other than the scandalizing of persons up and down the place, Diezani has diamond encrusted brass. What have they done to her?
But
10 years. 10 years. What has happened? Nothing. So what I'm not suggesting that Jonathan was some paragon of virtue or he was a strong man who could have taken Nigeria to El Dorado. But I'm saying that we must be careful not to buy the stories that the APC has told in order to demonize.
Yeah, but you and I was in Nigeria, sir, when Boko Haram was taking over local governments in the north.
Boko Haram was taking over local government, but it is in this same country.
The UN building was bombed.
Don't worry, it was in this same country.
Chibok girls.
Don't worry now, it was in this same country that a Commodore Laomi came out and told all of us that inside Buhari's cabinet you had Boko Haram commanders. He didn't say it in a coven.
No, I guess
it wasn't whispered. Oh, I'm coming. It wasn't whispered in a beer parlor. He said it inside Channel's morning show on TV, national TV. He was summoned, I think, by the DSS. He was released because the man said, and he has repeated it severally, that names of Boko Haram sponsors were given to the Buhari government. The UAE came out and said it had given the list of Boko Haram sponsors, over 300 of them, to the Buhari regime. Nothing ever happened to them. Baraje, the national secretary of the APC at inception, came out and told all of us that the APC imported Fulani terrorists to destabilize Nigeria during the Jonathan years. So if we are dealing with a situation where persons who openly confessed to sponsoring terrorism for political reasons have taken over the governance of the country, we have the benefit of hindsight when we are talking about the proliferation of Boko Haram in 2014, 2015. The least we can do is to acknowledge the confessions of APC operatives who have since then come out into the public space. Even the Dapchi and even the Chibok kidnapping, there have been various arguments since then to show that that was a false flag operation that was essentially driven to discredit the Jonathan government. That it took place or did not take place is not the argument, but that it was sponsored by persons within the opposition. These are valid things that have been in the public space for a long time.
Yeah, but if you're a weak president, and I'm not, again, two things
Don't worry, me and you are not arguing.
No, two things can be true at the same time, sir. It can't be true. And I've always said this and maintained this, that the Nigerian leadership class are weak and fakeless. So not just Jonathan, Buhari as well, Tinubu as well, all of them are weak. Because if they weren't weak,
are they weak or are they evil?
Okay, evil.
There's
They definitely evil. Of course, evil. Certainly evil. Unagreeable that they're evil. But when I say weak and fakeless, I mean that by not tackling the fundamental issues that Nigeria has, for example, corruption, insecurity.
What do you mean corruption?
By not tackling,
you don't have a corruption problem. If you should do a contract with me, and you stole 50 million naira hypothetically from me, the police would arrest you for stealing. But if a politician should come and steal 5 billion naira, they'll call it corruption. They won't call it stealing again. So we must be careful that we don't help them to normalize these languages.
Any language we have to use, right? The point I'm making is the weakness and fecklessness of the Nigerian leader has brought us to where we are today. So, but it seems to me as if you're excusing your Jonathan.
No, I think there is a misunderstanding here. Maybe we should try and clear it up. One, I was never a fan of Jonathan.
Okay.
Let's be clear about that. Two, I am not suggesting that Jonathan is blameless. What I'm trying to do is to place the blame in context. Whilst we're busy blaming Jonathan, we should also acknowledge what Jonathan was dealing with. There was an insurgency that was being enabled by politicians. That is no longer a fact in dispute. Politicians exacerbated the problems. That is not to say that it wasn't the duty of the president to have resolved that problem, and that is not to discharge him from charges of weakness. That's not the point. But I am saying that as you are establishing that, be quick to also establish that he wasn't facing ordinary problems. He was facing problems that had been contrived by those who believed that the easiest way to gain power was to destroy his own credibility, brand him feckless, brand him weak. They didn't need to do much to establish what had already been promoted by Jonathan himself, but it does not remove the fact that he wasn't dealing with a normal situation. You had persons who had decided that it was fine with them to destroy Nigeria in order to destroy the man and to gain power. Okay, so it wasn't just a normal insurgency that he was dealing with. That's my argument.
Okay, so moving on to, I want to talk about MKO Abiola and kind of link it up with the current president. Do you see any similarities between?
None whatsoever.
What are your thoughts on Abiola, and then do you see any similarities?
When Abiola was running for the president, I was already well in my 20s. I was closer to 30 than to 20 when he was running, so I wasn't a child. And what I know as a fact is that the Nigerians were they invested their hope in Abiola. They voted for him across the length and breadth of Nigeria. The election was annulled. That Nigeria was brutally divided along ethnic lines in order to sustain that annulment, moved Abiola into another realm entirely. To now compare such a person with a man who has literally shot his way to power, literally, who is busy dividing Nigeria in order to preserve himself in office, is a travesty. You can't compare the two. In actual fact, it's an insult to Abiola's memory that people find this comparison sometime, and I'm very pained. The man deserved better. It's a double tragedy to die for a people who will be comparing him to the person who currently occupies that office. They are not the same. Abiola was a much better human being.
I mean, there have been allegations of corruption against him, against Abiola. What would you say?
It is not my business to be defending a dead man of charges that are being raised against him after the fact of his death. When he was alive, they should have raised all these different charges. When he was alive, none of these charges were raised without him addressing them. And we did not vote for him to become a saint. We voted for a man to become the president. Those who have removed him from gaining that office, who prevented him, doesn't lie in their mouths to justify their evil deeds by concocting all manners of crimes as afterthoughts in justification of their evil. He was corrupt, he was this, he sponsored coup, he did that. We knew what he was when we were voting for him. But we were not voting for him to enter the office of the Pope. He wasn't meant to become the Bishop of Nigeria. We voted for the President of Nigeria. And if he had proven to be all those things that they are now accusing him of, we would have not voted for him in the re-election. It was up to us. In our stupidity, we voted for him. And that was our prerogative. It wasn't the prerogative of IBB, Abacha, Obasanjo, and all the idiots who sat down to annul that election. It wasn't their prerogative. It was the prerogative of the Nigerian people. And they exercised that prerogative. And since that prerogative was cancelled 32 years ago, we've been in the wilderness. So to compare that man to this one, the only thing that connects them is the fact that this one has leveraged on the loss of Abiola to force himself into national reckoning, but to extend it to suggest that Tinubu in some way, shape or form offers any shadow of Abiola is an insult to the memory of Abiola. They are not the same. Infradig.
Yes, sir. Speaking of Abiola and Tinubu, another consequential Yoruba man is Obasanjo. From reading your book, I'm an Igbo person. I'm Igbo. I'm from Anambra State. I don't talk about tribe that much, but just for the purpose of this particular question, it seems to me that from reading your book and from looking at how Yorubas perceive Obasanjo, it's as if he's not really accepted as a Yoruba man. And from reading your book, it's obvious that you don't like him, you hate him, you despise him. Why do you think that's the case, that the Yoruba tribe don't accept Obasanjo, despite the fact that he was president for 8 years and was seen by many Nigerians as a Yoruba person being in office?
A lot of errors in that question, and I'll attempt to deal with them. Number one, I do not hate Obasanjo. I'm actually incapable of hating anybody. I might hate what you do, your actions. I might abhor your inactions. But to hate your person degrades my own humanity. So I cannot hate the persons. I do not accept Obasanjo's worldview. The man believes that nobody else understands Nigeria or can do for Nigeria the things that he had done for Nigeria. And it is this unfortunate worldview that has led us into the mess we are in today. So when you see me railing against Obasanjo, it is not his person, it is the actions. In asking me questions related to, I think it was the impeachment, this purported removal or suspension of Similari,
Florida,
you raised the questions of Obasanjo and Fayose. I constantly speak about Obasanjo because he was the first in the democratic experiment, and he had the opportunity to set the tone for the kind of democratic experience we would have, but he militarized it. At every opportunity to leave the right example, Obasanjo left the wrong examples. He built an EFCC that was essentially an attack dog that he used against the opposition. He preached and railed against corruption, but he enabled it in his worst forms. So when you see me talking about Obasanjo, it's because, in truth, I believe Obasanjo is the most intelligent person that has occupied that office, and he has failed woefully at leaving enduring legacies of probity, of democratic norms. He left bad examples all over the place. Bad elections, impositions on the judiciary, acts of impunity in Odi, in Zakibiam, in removing Fayose, in removing Alamie, all kind, rampaging all over the place like an enraged, maddened bull. So when you see me talking about him, I'm not talking about his person. It is the deeds that I have referred to. So if a man has acted in a manner that is suggestive of a person who has the utmost disdain for the rule of law, something that I cherish, how could I possibly speak of him in terms other than those describing him as exactly what he is? Obasanjo is the most intelligent person to have sat in that office. But what is it that he has achieved of consequence that we can point at and say that because he did this, the president that followed him were compelled to do the right thing because he did the right things? So it's the function of the kind of examples he left behind after his time in office. 8 years in office. What is the enduring legacy? If you point at EFCC, I'll show you a debt recovering agency that turns into a kitten when it's dealing with politicians, but becomes a tiger when it's dealing with 419 and Yahoo boys. If you want to talk about the ICPC, I'll be asking you how many governors, senators, House of Reps, local government, how many have they placed on the path of rectitude? It's very easy to point at the construction of all kind of moribund institutions, but which one of them have stood up to the test of time?
None.
There you have it. I do not hate Obasanjo, and I dare say that Yorubas do not hate him either. The only thing that has happened is that Yorubas have never... It's only in recent times that we have become increasingly incapable of telling ourselves the truth. And it's not just a Yoruba thing, it's a Nigerian thing. As a collective, it's become increasingly difficult to look ourselves in the eye and just say the truth. So, but Yorubas have a tradition, a culture of dissent. It's never been a problem for the Yoruba man to look at his Oba and say, I don't agree with what you are doing. That's the ruler. You are disagreeing with the ruler. In Yoruba land, we have a tradition of forcing traditional rulers to commit suicide when they lose popular support. So in Yoruba land, it is easier to find people speaking in disagreement with their rulers. That might be the reason why you think the Yorubas hate Obasanjo. In fact, if anything, the history suggests the exact opposite of what you are saying. It was in the Yorubas finding support for Obasanjo in 2003 that Obasanjo brought his electoral tsunami to Yoruba land, where the AD was removed from all the states except Lagos in 2003 because they went and supported Obasanjo instead of standing on their own against the PDP. So it's not about hating Obasanjo. Nobody hates him. I don't. It is his deeds and inactions that I dislike.
Yes, sir. Just want to shift gears and discuss the civil war with you, the Biafran civil war. What are your thoughts on the civil war?
I believe the same things that caused the civil war are still with us today. We've learned nothing. Where people forget nothing, forgive nothing, and learn nothing from history. I was born during the Civil War, but everything I've read on the Civil War are still right here with us today. I don't think we've learned anything from it, and I dare say that we're already relitigating the Civil War on many fronts. Exactly what part of Nigeria is at peace?
How about IPOB, Nnamdi Kanu?
See, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. I have never found any comfort in telling the oppressed how they should fight their oppressors. IPOB is a reaction. It is a reaction to oppression. Is it a reaction that I would support? Since when did I begin to have a veto on how a man who is fighting for his freedom should fight his fight? How is it my own? The only thing I know is you cannot dismiss the legitimacy of the grievances that have battered IPOB. If Nigeria is interested in peace, perhaps it should cure itself of its Igbo problems. But the reality is that every disadvantaged Nigerian is an Igbo man today. Whether that man is in Benue, or whether he's in the Plateau, or whether he's in Adamawa, wherever the displaced, disadvantaged, victimized Nigerian is, you have an IPOB. It's just that they bear different names. Some IPOB are what do you call them now? Some IPOB are now militants, some IPOB are kidnappers, some IPOB are terrorists. They are different IPOBs across the length or breadth of Nigeria. They are wearing different masks. But if you are disadvantaged institutionally, it is always going to birth reactions. So what you are seeing are merely reactions.
Yes, sir. In this same book as well, like I said, I love this book a lot. It really went in deep in the book, and thank you for writing it.
Thank you.
In your book, you talk about two kinds of warriors, and I just want to read a little bit of what you said.
Two kinds of
warriors.
Okay.
You said the foolish warrior and the wise warrior. The foolish warrior is the one that would fight and die in the wars of the oppressors, and the wise warrior is he who would fight for the birth of the Nigerian nation. The ones that would embrace the non-violent paths to the birth of the Nigerian nation, that would speak to bridge divides, that would act to heal the wounds, that would demand for others everything they have desired for themselves. My question would be, and I think it's one of the essential things you dealt with in this book, do you believe we can get the Nigeria of our dreams without violence? And it harkens back to what you said about one of the mistakes from the last election that you guys didn't think about taking to the streets.
I think first thing first, you need to understand that violence is a subjective word. Very, very subjective, especially within the Nigeria context. If I went out to demonstrate peacefully, let me use the Lekki toll gate. I was one of those who provided flags to protesters. All they carried were flags. They were at the toll gate singing the national anthem. And then the Nigerian army came and shot and killed and maimed and then denied, prevaricate. And then Nigerians started denying on behalf of the Nigerian state and the Nigerian army. Question is this: who was violent?
The Nigerian army, the Nigerian states.
The only person who was not violent in that context were the protesters. But they were the ones who had violence visited upon them. So I cannot tell you that there is a non-violent path to the Nigerian revolution. What I can tell you is that those who are seeking the revolution may on their own decide to adopt a non-violent stand. That is what I have elected to do. I have no control over the responses of the state, but the responses of the state are predictable. The Nigerian state is reflexively violent. It cannot find any other response to demands for citizenship other than violence. It is the only way it can respond. So knowing that that is the only way the state can respond or will respond, it then falls on the revolutionary to be sure that in planning his own actions, he figures the readiness of the state to embrace violence into his calculation. That is why if I'm planning any sort of protest, I'll be looking at alternatives to coming to the street. And if I'm coming to the street, I'll be looking at steps to ensure that I minimize the possibility of the Nigerian state having sitting ducks to shoot at. So, talking about violence or non-violent, we must always bear in mind that we can only speak to our own actions. The actions of the state is never in our hands. But in disavowing violence, we delegitimize the capacity of the state to deploy it. It doesn't mean the state will not, but you delegitimize the deployment. That's the extent that I can speak to this issue right here and now, but it's not in the hands of the victims.
Yes.
It's always in the hand of the state.
Like I said, you can never get tired of listening to P2B and the Dele Farotimi, because this man is not biased. If P2B was a bad person, this man will come out and call him out as a bad person. But you cannot call P2B a bad person, because he have not shown any reason why you should call him a bad person. There's no reason. Because he was governor for 8 years, he did well, he came out of office. There's no bad news, no bad record of him. even though the interviewer was trying to paint in some things about that he does not agree with him, but that judge dropped out there. P2B was a government agent, none of that, and there have not been any record of saying that he stole money, he did this one. Just take a look at the past governors. They must have something that they're holding them on, but in P2B, that's nothing you can hold them on to. Because he was more like a saint, even though nobody's perfect, but he was close to perfect because he has no bad record in 8 years in office. And Dele Farotimi is a man that always cites the truth. He says things as it is. Everything he says in this video is exactly how everything is. He does not paint words to try to please anybody. He's not after a political position. He's not after money. He's not after rank. He's not after anything. He's just there for saying the right thing and standing with the truth. Like I said, this man is a man of wisdom, and you can never get tired of listening to Dele Farotimi. I believe I want the video to the end. Just air your views in the comment section. Let me know what you think about it, about the video. Even when he was talking about Goodluck, Jonathan, Obasanjo, Nnamdi Kanu, many things he said in the video. I want to get your views in the comment section, guys. Don't forget to tell your views. It's your boy again. Keys was stay tuned, guys.